everyone, I'm Dr. Z and you're watching Dr. Z PhD. It's a place to be for expert info on gender. Some of you have asked me to do a video on what really is non-binary identity and if it's similar or different from genderqueer identity. Especially since in the past decade or so, there has been a growing group of people who don't identify as binary transgender. That's transgender male or female, or to give you one more example, a trans person who's really interested in going from one binary into another. So in today's video, I really would like to give you a brief historical overview of word non-binary as well as the word genderqueer, because I think historical context is important, and offer you a brief definition of each. The historical research and all the literature that I have done for this video is linked below in the intro in case if you are interested and you'd like to read up some more, go ahead and help yourself. And also make sure to subscribe to my channel so that way you don't miss any new content coming from me. Okay, now let's talk gender diversity, one of my favorite topics to discuss. For starters, let's look at the historical origin of the word genderqueer and what it really means when somebody says they're genderqueer. Well, it wasn't until the 1990s that we experienced a cultural shift actually towards the word transgender as a much more wider umbrella term versus word transsexual. And for those of you who are not really familiar with the word transsexual, historically, it has been used to describe people who are transitioning from one binary into another. But because many people didn't desire a full surgical or even medical transition, the term transgender was introduced. As a result, the word transgender as an umbrella term really made a lot of room to include identities other than strict binary male and female. Term for genderqueer entered our vocabulary in the early 90s to mean a person who has not and is not planning to undergo surgery. It really wasn't until later 90s that the word genderqueer began to take on a much more established and solid meaning, to really describe someone who felt their gender lay outside of the binary, or between male and female, or towards one specific binary identity, but not quite totally identifying with it. People today who identify as genderqueer feel an inner experience and a conscious expression of a non-male and non-female identity, so not really exactly male or female. It is important to know that historically the word genderqueer has also been associated with a political stance against gender, but today it is much more readily used as an umbrella term to identify any kind of gender identities outside of male and female. So genderqueer was really the first word that entered gender diverse landscape. Even before non-binary word was introduced, it really wasn't until a decade after genderqueer started to be widely used that the term non-binary also started to appear. People often really describe non-binary identity in three ways or a combination of the three. One, a non-binary identity is a person who is between male or female. Two, a person who is closer to one gender than another, but not entirely male or female. And three, a person who is outside of the binary system altogether, so completely not belonging to the system at all. As you can see, genderqueer and non-binary are really words carrying a lot of similar meanings, but are not and often are used very interchangeably. The difference between the two terms has been widely debated, but to a lot of people, they really often mean similar things. Now, outside of academia, some view genderqueer as a much more than just an identity, but also as a statement against the gender system. Whereas in contrast, non-binary identities have been described as apolitical in nature and more as a statement of identity, and often linked more with those who identify as trans. Today, I often see both non-binary and genderqueer are meant to be used as umbrella terms, and often identities such as gender fluid, gender fuck, or polygender, and other identities tend to fall under those umbrella terms. The challenge is that the words we use today to describe identities that don't conform to gender binary change all of the time. That's one of the biggest challenges we see. So there's also a personal and subjective understanding of what those words mean to each individual. But in short, non-binary and genderqueer carry more similarities than differences and really fall in the scope of gender diverse identities. So they're really much more similar in scope. Not to mention, these individuals do absolutely experience gender dysphoria and may undertake various aspects of gender transition. So, for example, they may decide to pursue hormonal transition, but not surgery, or some parts of the surgical transition, but not really have all of the surgeries entailed with transition. So as you can see, it can be confusing when someone really says they're non-binary trans, because people often assume trans identity are solely binary in nature, meaning a person wants to go from one into another. And keep in mind, as our vocabulary expands and shifts, so does our understanding of gender really in relationship to gender shifts all of the time. So there you go. This is kind of my brief overview of non-binary and genderqueer terminology. As mentioned again, they're really very, very similar. Genderqueer, to summarize, has entered the landscape of vocabulary much more earlier, before non-binary was, and has more a little bit of political connotation association to it, as somebody taking a stance against gender, whereas non-binary is more an apolitical in nature and much more related to an identity, and that's why it really falls a lot of times under trans identity, if you will, versus genderqueer. But really they're interchangeable, and it's really up to an individual to decide which one they identify with, which one defines who they are much more. What about you? I really would love to hear your comments on the word genderqueer or non-binary, if they relate to you, or how do you see those words, what are your understanding of their meaning, whether you think they're much more similar or actually different. So please comment below, and if you're new to my channel, consider subscribing, and I'll see you all next Friday. Bye.